we're going to be using calculators in class some, and before we get really started with them, I wanted to clear up any calculator confusion that may be out there. Now I know most people have used a calculator before, and you can add and subtract and turn it upside down and spell words and all that kind of stuff, but we're going to be using it in class, and sometimes you can run into tricky situations, so I want to make sure that you know how to use the calculators to get the right answers. So if I were to give you this as a quiz and told you to answer the questions with your calculator, could you solve these questions with your calculator? My first equation, number 1, 3,456 minus 483 equals, number 2, subtract 29 from 45. Number 3, 25 cents plus 18 cents. Number 4, $4.37 plus $2.83. They seem simple enough, but sometimes when you're using your calculator, you might run into some tricky situations, so I'm going to give you a few hints to help you along the way. The first is commas. We see commas that are placed in long numbers because they help us to read those numbers more easily. If you go back and look, 3,456. Those commas separate out the families so that we can easier see the place value of the numbers. Well, when you get ready to put those numbers into a calculator, the calculator doesn't have a comma key. So when you get your answer, you are going to have to remember to go back in and put your commas. So if I'm going to try to solve this first equation, 3,456 minus 483, on my calculator, I'm going to press 3, 4, 5, 6, the minus sign, then 4, 8, 3, then you have to remember to press that enter or equal sign, and I'm going to get the answer 2973. Well, if on your paper you write 2973, you're missing something. It's up to you to go back and add in those commas. So you count over the first 3 family members and you place your comma. So the answer is 2,973. So no comma key on your calculator, but you have to put those in your answers. Our second possible tricky situation is subtraction with the calculator. When you subtract with a calculator, be sure to enter the larger number first. When subtracting one number from another number, enter the larger number and then subtract the smaller number. Now when you get into higher grade levels, you're going to be working with some negative numbers, and you're just going to have to know how to read the math problem so that you know which number you're subtracting from another. But for our purposes, you're going to enter the larger number first and then subtract the smaller number. These are the positive numbers that you're going to be working with, not negative numbers, in 3rd grade. So if I'm going to subtract 29 from 45, I have to stop and I have to think, what is this problem really asking me to do? I have to think it's asking me to do this equation, 45 minus 29. So on my calculator, I'm going to press 4, 5, the minus sign, 2, 9, then I have to press my equal sign, and I'll get the solution to my equation, which in this case would be 16. So you have to think, what is the problem asking me, and then enter each of your signs and your numbers. Another tricky situation can be when you're working with money on the calculator, when you're entering dollars and cents. When entering cents into the calculator, remember that amounts under $1, it means $0. You don't have any dollars. And that amount of cents. So if you see 25 cents, this really means $0.25. Don't have any dollars. And it should be entered as 0.25 into your calculator. Your answer will have a decimal point between the dollars and the cents. So if I have this problem, this was problem number 3, 25 cents plus 18 cents equals. I have to go in and I have to put my decimals. There's a lot of buttons I have to push in order to solve this equation. So I'm going to enter 0, then my decimal sign, it looks like a period there on your calculator, 2, 5, plus, there's not a cent sign. You've taken care of the cents by putting this decimal there, 0, decimal, 1, 8, and then you have to press the equal sign. And my answer is going to be 0.43, which means 43 cents. Or I could write it as 0.43. Our last tricky situation that you can run into on a calculator when you're solving some of these equations is the zeros in your money answers. What happened? There's only one place after the decimal. Oh, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. The calculator doesn't show zeros when they're to the far right of the decimal. So when you have your dollar and your decimal and then your change over here, if that last number is a 0, your calculator's not going to show it. However, money answers are always written with a place for dimes and a place for the pennies. Well, that makes sense because after my decimal, I have my tenths and I have my hundredths, dimes and pennies. Okay, so let's look at number 4 from our examples on the first board. I want to add $4.37 plus $2.83. I'm going to enter my money. There's not a dollar sign on your calculator, so I'm going to enter 4.37 plus 2.83, then I have to press that equal sign, and I'm going to get 7.2. It's 7 2/10 in decimals if I'm reading my decimals. Well, I'm working with money. I have to go back and look at my original equation, and I see that it's asking me about money, but I don't have anything over here. So what I have to do is I have to know that 7.2, my answer I got here, is really $7.20. I can add that 0 on there, can add my dollar sign and add my 0, and it's not changing the value of my answer. Okay? But don't be tricked. Tricky situation. 7.2 is not the same as 7.02. Your 0 has to go at the end to the far right of the decimal point. I would much rather have $7.20 than $7.02. It's only 18 cents difference, but it all adds up. So be careful when you're writing your decimals, when you're working with money, that you make sure you get those 2 places behind the decimal so that you have an appropriate and a correct money answer.